Hey everybody, we are back with the final video for this workshop. Today we're going to be talking about creating a poster using both Photoshop and Illustrator, and then we're going to talk briefly about exporting everything and putting it inside of InDesign. Like I say at the beginning of every single one of these videos, if you need a little bit more help either with InDesign or Photoshop or Illustrator, make sure you watch those other videos linked in the video references. Those have a bunch more tips than these sort of quick demos, and you'll probably be able to find answers for whatever you're looking for in those videos. If not, email me. I'll try my best to help you. We're getting closer to the deadline if you are watching this on Thursday night or Friday morning, but you still have plenty of time to finish this up, so don't worry about it. We're going to go directly into making our poster, and on the syllabus you'll see that the dimensions for it are going to be 12 by 18. Now, you can start in Photoshop or Illustrator, it doesn't really matter. In fact, learning the process in which you work best is really important for your own process and your own workflow. I tend to start in Illustrator because I know that I'm going to export out of Illustrator at the very end. I put as a requirement that you need to do your type in Illustrator. Type in Illustrator is actually vector, plus the formatting and the typesetting is much better in Illustrator than it is in Photoshop. So as a general rule, you should be doing your type in either InDesign or Illustrator, depending on, what you're working on. But if you can avoid it, don't do your type in Photoshop. All right, so I'm going to click New File, and I'm just going to create a file that is 12 by 18, as the specifications say. I'm going to leave everything as is and hit Create. All right, we've got a blank canvas here. Everything is ready to go. The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to write out some type that I just want to include on my poster. Okay, so I just wrote some random copy. Here I've put like a title and a subtitle, some fake dates, and then a fake location. I think you guys should write whatever copy you think fits for whatever you're making for your poster. It doesn't have to be like an event. It could be, a movie poster, or it could just be an art poster. So it doesn't really need to follow any of this. So at this point, you basically need to decide what you want to do with this poster. I find it pretty helpful early in the process to draw a couple thumbnails with ideas for what I want the poster to look like. For this demo, I'm just going to reuse some of the elements that I've already made for these demo videos. You are also allowed to use other elements that you've made along the way. Please feel free to do that. If you use some of those elements, you're probably going to have to end up editing some of it, since you are going to have to put it in this poster size and you're going to have to add some text in it. So even if you're using those elements that you made before, that's totally fine with me. You'll still be using those same processes of, exporting stuff out of Photoshop and putting it into Illustrator, or copying stuff from another Illustrator file into this Illustrator file. So it's really all the same to me. But I just want you guys to be, trying new stuff as usual. So don't just turn in one of your edited photos with, a line of text on the top. I would like you guys to actually think about how this will make a nice poster. So please spend a little bit more time with it than that. So I'm going to go into Photoshop. Here I have my photo collage from last time, and I'm just going to click File, and I'm going to Save As to save this as a new file. And since this is marked as a PSD file, I don't have to worry about naming my Illustrator file the same name. It actually keeps things grouped together, so I normally do that anyways. In fact, I'm going to save this real quick before I forget. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to match this file to match the same size as the Illustrator one, since I do want this image to go all the way in the background of my Illustrator file. So I'm going to go to Image, Canvas Size, 12 by 18. Okay. And you'll see that the background actually spreads way further than the size of the image. That's totally fine. I'm going to select everything that's here, and I'm just going to expand it so it fits into this space. All right, so there's a couple things that I want to change here. I'm going to take out the football and the peanuts. So things are a little bit cleaner since we're going to be adding in that text anyways. All right, so we have that Photoshop file saved. Now what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go back to our Illustrator file and I'm going to move all this text off, and I'm going to select the PSD file and I'm actually going to drag it directly into my Illustrator file. This will open up here. The really cool thing about Adobe software is its compatibility with each other. So for example, if I go back to this Photoshop file and I turn back on those peanuts and I hit save, when I return to my Illustrator file, this window will pop up. And this basically just asks you if you would want to update whatever link you have inside of your Illustrator file to the most recent version. So now you'll see those peanuts are back in. I'm going to go back and I'm going to actually turn this off since I don't want them. Same deal. All right, so just a couple of small tips before I get into a time lapse of this video. What I really like to do in Illustrator to keep my workflow going pretty smoothly is I like to take whatever my background image is, or if I'm working on an illustration, my background layer, and I like to put this in a separate layer, move it to the back, and name this background. Then I like to lock it so then I can't adjust it while I'm working and accidentally click it. Alternatively, you can also hit Command 2. This locks elements so you can't move them. And to undo that, you can just hit Command Option 2 and it unlocks it. Now I will be going into the time lapse, so see you on the other side. So generally I like where this poster is, but there is one move that I want to make that will require me rearranging my Photoshop file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Photoshop. I am going to turn off all the layers except for the sky. And it's totally fine that the Ferris wheel is here. It's not going to change anything for us. I'm going to hit File, Save As, and I'm going to label this _sky. And then I'm going to turn on those layers again that I had before. And I'm going to do a File, Save As, Foreground. Alternatively, you could save these as PNGs or JPEGs and place them into Illustrator, but since I've been doing some nudging around, it's just safer for me to put the editable Photoshop file in and still be able to make changes. So I'm going to take those two files that we just saved and I'm going to drag them into Illustrator. I recorded this earlier with a mistake, but essentially I'm going to turn off the background and turn everything back on, and then I'm going to save this as the foreground. And I'm going to drag this into here. All right, so you might see where I'm going with this. I'm going to delete this background image and put this sky image there instead. And you can always align using these align tools, move it to the background, and then I'm going to put this here with that same alignment tool, move it all the way to the back. But then, since I want this to match this, but go behind it a little bit, I can do just that. I'm going to hit Command 2 to lock this, so I can just adjust this a little bit so it's still legible. Going to adjust the clouds one more time. All right, so this is my finished poster. I hope you can see now how you can combine using Photoshop and Illustrator to make one project, and how easy it is to actually just drop those files in and, edit them as you go. All right, so now comes the final part of this project, which is putting everything within InDesign. I'm going to open up InDesign, and I'm just going to open the booklet that I set up for this project. So you'll see that I've got a number of pages set up right now, but they're all blank. I haven't set up any columns or master pages and stuff, but please use a grid system when you are making your book. I'm just going to show you the basic demo of how to put stuff in here, how to export things correctly. But if you need a little bit help with the margins, columns, numbering, etc., please make sure that you watch those reference videos in the syllabus. So we're going to go in the order of the things that we made, and then we're going to put those things in one by one and make sure that you guys know how to put them into your book. So I'm going to go ahead and open both my illustration and the logo from that first day. I'm going to select everything here, press Command C for copy, and just paste it, Command V, into this book. So you'll see that this just comes in super easily. I'm going to resize it down so it can fit onto this spread. So that's exactly what we wanted. Very simple. Another option that you have, and I would recommend this if you had maybe a little bit more complex of an illustration, maybe with a background, maybe things that you don't really want to eventually move in InDesign, I would recommend you export this as a JPEG first. So you can go up to File, Export, Export As. And we're going to export this into our images folder that we set up with our InDesign booklet, where all the images for our book are going to go so they don't get lost. I'm going to click Images, and I'm going to export this as a JPEG. Make sure that you use artboards. If you have multiple artboards, select the range that you want to export and hit Export. Here are a bunch of other export options. I'm not going to bother with any of these, so I'm just going to hit OK. And now when we go back into our InDesign file, we can go and select our JPEG from the images folder and put that into our InDesign file, just like that. So we've got our illustration here. I'm going to hit W on my keyboard, and that just gives us a preview of how things look. You'll see that the stroke weight on the copy and pasted one is a little thicker, and that is because this is exported as a JPEG, so the stroke weights won't stay the same when you resize it. The stroke weights here are 1 point, just like they are in Illustrator, and since we resized it a little bit smaller, it does get a little bit thicker looking in proportion, but if you export it as a JPEG, everything will resize proportionally, so the lines will look a little thinner. This is also something to keep in mind when you're exporting this. If your illustration relies on the stroke weights, it's better to export it as a JPEG. If it doesn't matter as much, copy and pasting is much faster, so completely up to you. On the next spread, we will be exporting our logo. So back into Illustrator, here is our logo looking very nice. So the first thing we're going to do here is make sure that all the elements of this logo are expanded. So that means like all the text has been create outlined, all the strokes have been expanded, and everything is basically a shape rather than a stroke or type or anything like that. That will make the vector be able to be resized without any problems. So here, all my text is already outlined. So I'm going to just select this outside oval, and I'm going to go to Object and Expand. So now you can see this is actually a shape and no longer a stroke. For this, there are also multiple options for export, the easiest obviously being copy and pasting. I'm going to group it before I copy and paste, and it goes directly just like that. Just like before, you can resize it to fit your page however you want. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller than the margins I have set up. This is fully a vector, so you can still go in and edit it if you really needed to, but I wouldn't recommend you edit this in InDesign. You should just edit it in Illustrator. If you're working for a client, there's usually going to be a bunch of different ways that they ask you to export a logo, and they might have different file requirements depending on what kind of project you guys are working on. So for example, when you're working on web versus print, they might ask you for different types of files. By now, you should probably know how to export as a PNG or a JPEG, which are the most common two file formats. There's also SVG, which exports as a vector file. So just like an Illustrator file, it'll still be vector and you'll be able to resize it anywhere. This is a very common export for when you're exporting logos. You'll also often give an SVG or EPS, which is a similar file, with all the other types of file exported at different sizes for a client, just in case they need to print it really big. Additionally, you can hit Save As and save it as a PDF, which is also a very common format for logos. I'm going to go ahead and go back and export this as an SVG as a demonstration. You don't need to do this for this class. You can just copy and paste it. That's totally fine. I'm going to put it in my images and use my artboard. So I'm going to drag my SVG into my InDesign file. And you'll see this follows the artboard, so it's a little bit bigger. But with our InDesign tools, we can always make the frame a little bit smaller. And then enlarge the whole thing a little bit. All right, next up are going to be our Photoshop images. So I'm just going to go ahead and open it. So I only made one again, but at this point you should have 3 different images edited. What you're going to want to do is hit File, Export As. If you have an older version of Photoshop, I think the exporting is actually directly in the Save As folder. So you'll be doing the same thing, clicking Save As and then selecting the file type in the dropdown and then exporting from there. So I'm just going to do this as a JPEG. And the reason why I do a JPEG rather than a PNG is that PNG files are a little bit larger. I think PNGs are usually better used when you have some sort of transparency. I find that JPEGs, even though it does compress the image a little bit more, the difference is not that big, and also it saves my computer some storage. All right, JPEG, quality good. So InDesign, same thing, going to my images, dropping in my JPEG. All right. Alternatively, you can drop in the Photoshop file. This is similar. And just like when we were using the Photoshop stuff in Illustrator, if we make any edits, so for example, I'm just going to turn off this top gradient map and hit save. You'll see that there is a little warning symbol up here that tells you that this link has been modified. If I double click it, it'll update it. So I'm going to go back and I'm just going to revert that change and hit save again, and then double click it again. Before you package and export your book, it's always good to go in the links panel and make sure that none of your files are unlinked or modified in any way. So you'll see that there are no warnings underneath this column, which means that we're all good. You can also see if there's any issues here in this little pre-flight panel. This will tell you if there's any issues with overset text or unlinked images or anything like that. And then next will be our collage, which will be exported in the same way as our Photoshop images. File, export as, JPEG, and then dragged and dropped into here. So same thing here, you can put in the Photoshop file directly if you want to, but if you can, I would export it as a JPEG just because you guys are going to give all your files to me eventually, and you know, the Photoshop files can get a little bit big. Okay, so the last piece is the poster, so I'm going to go back into Illustrator where our poster is, and I'm going to go to File, Export, Export As. So this one I'm just going to export as a JPEG and do all the same stuff. Oh, and you'll see that I actually exported it into the wrong folder, so I'm going to drag this into images before exporting it into our file. And I'm just going to drag that poster here. All right. So that's basically how you export all of these elements and put them into your book. Your next step would be to use your columns and make some sort of cool book design that's better than just, you know, randomly placing them onto each page. You're also going to have to add some captions, and that's easily done using, you know, the text tool. Just drag a box. Here is my photo collage. And then use all of the type options to make these things look good, etc., etc. You're also going to need to design a cover and a back cover for your book. This can be done either in Illustrator or Photoshop, or even directly in InDesign, whatever you feel comfortable with, but there has to be something there. You're also going to have to add pagination, which are the book numbers, and please don't add them one by one. Please follow the InDesign tutorials that I have to add them using master pages. You're also going to have to add a page or two at least of some text directly set into InDesign. That text needs to say some stuff about who that character is, maybe where the character is from, and even maybe some stuff about why you like that character so much. It's really up to you. I just need to see some text in the book. And then finally, you're also going to need a spread at the end or at the beginning of the book. That is your colophon. So since most people don't actually know what a colophon is, I'm just going to do a quick demo on that. I'm going to add another spread here at the bottom. So normally the colophon is found at the end of the book or the very beginning of the book, and it doesn't need to be complicated, but following whatever system you have previously made, you should have a little text box, and you should list some of the information such as, you know, designed by, you know, your name. You can list Practicum 2022, and also make sure that you list all the fonts that you used in the book. You don't need to list the stuff that's in the artwork, like in your poster or anything. So here we've used Minion Pro and I think Knockout. So you list basically all the resources that you have used. For other projects, you can also list like your mentor or, put your thanks here, other notes, that kind of thing. It also doesn't have to be laid out like this, but it can be something very simple. If you're a little bit confused about the whole colophon thing, you can always Google it or look it up on Google Images and see some examples of it. Basically, the requirements for this is for you to list your name and then also list the typefaces that you've used. If you need more detailed instruction about InDesign, please make sure to watch those other videos linked in the syllabus. Those go really in depth about using InDesign. There really are a lot of pieces to InDesign, so it felt kind of weird to just repeat those videos again in this one when you can just watch those videos. It saves me time and it saves you time. So if you need help, please watch those. Even if you are familiar with InDesign, there are some general book design tips in those videos as well, so they might be worth checking out. The final thing we're going to talk about is packaging this file. I pretty much made an entire video on exporting and packaging your file, which is linked in the syllabus, but just a quick run through. Basically what you're going to want to do is make sure that your file is saved. Go to File, go to Package. Make sure that there are no missing or inaccessible images, and then hit Package. This will take you to the folder that you've been working with, and it'll give you a bunch of options. So make sure that you have your fonts copied. If you're using Adobe fonts, that's fine. I'll download them on my computer when you send over the file. But make sure everything else that isn't an Adobe font is copied in here. Make sure you copy your link graphics, update graphic links in package. Make sure you include the IDML just in case. Include your PDF. And then please name your folder your name so I know whose file it is. So for example, mine would be Jessica Payne book folder. Please put your name at the beginning of the folder. You can name the rest of it whatever you want, but please just put your name in it so I know whose belongs to who. And then hit Package. So now when we go into our folder, we will see that your book folder would be right here. IDML, NDD, and PDF are all here, so you can even preview this PDF by page. And all the document fonts are found here. All the links of the images that you've used in your book will be in this folder as well. Afterwards, you're going to want to right-click on that folder and hit Compress. This will make your folder into a zip file, so you'll be able to send it to me. And then you're just going to go to WeTransfer.com and you'll be able to send your file to me. And we'll probably go over this in class again so you know where to go. Since I just noticed that the PDF in the packaged folder actually shows things page by page, something you might want to do for class is exporting the PDF. So if you end up putting this PDF in your final packaged folder, you'll want to put your name in it just in case. Just in general, maybe just put your name in the InDesign file name so it's easier for me and I don't accidentally grade the wrong person. And hit Save. This will open up a dialog where you can actually adjust a bunch of things for your PDF. Make sure that you have all your pages selected and then select Spreads. So the important thing here is just to hit Spreads instead of Pages. And then you can hit Export. That should go in the same place. And then here, when we view this now, these show up as Spreads rather than Pages, which will be better for when you're presenting them in class. Okay, so that's it for this demo. To wrap it up, you're going to be making some sort of poster using both Photoshop and Illustrator, making sure that all the text is done in Illustrator, and then using all the export formats that I used in this video. Export everything that you've made in the last few days and put them into your InDesign file. Make sure you also include all the required things listed in the syllabus for the book. So like the cover design, the pagination, all those different things. And if you need help with that, make sure you're looking at those reference videos. You can skip through the parts that, you already know or that don't matter to you and just find the parts that you're looking for. After that, make sure that you package all of your files and compress them, and then have a PDF exported as spreads to show during class. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, reach out early. I won't be able to meet face-to-face with you before like 6 o'clock since I'll be working. But if you have email questions, I'll answer them, throughout the day. Please reach out earlier than later. It'll just make things easier and it'll give you a little bit more time. In general, please don't procrastinate with this stuff. I'm really looking forward to seeing your books. So I'll see you guys in class for our little final critique. If you're not finished with your book, that's totally okay. Just make sure that it's done by end of day Saturday. Don't worry too much. Don't stress. Just have fun and good luck and, get it all done. I'll see you guys in class. Good luck.